Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name is not Kevin, and in today's video we are revisiting our Halloween zoo, Phantom Creek, and we are introducing an animal that was voted for on the community page and by very popular demand is now joining the zoo. It is of course the Pygmy Hippopotamus. And yes, the reason for this is because of Moo Deng. Who doesn't love Moo Deng? I am so glad that there's just a cute animal that is an internet sensation at the moment. Him and Pesto are adorable, or her and Pesto, I can't actually remember if it's a girl or boy. I think it's a girl. But yes, I thought we would introduce them to the zoo, and we are starting by building a little hill. This is going to be to the left-hand side of the church and the graveyard that we built in our first episode of this zoo. And the idea for this one is to have our vets, because at the moment we don't have a vet, so if an animal gets unwell, they just die. We're going to place the vet on top of this little hill, and there's going to be a dirt path that leads up there, and then we're going to have a big garden that's attached to it. And within that garden, there is an old well, a lovely traditional water well where you'd lower a bucket into the ground and somehow you would come up with perfectly clean drinking water. I've never understood how those things work, but yes, we're going to build one, and the idea is that it kind of broke at some point and the garden has become quite flooded, and that allows our Pygmy Hippos to go for a nice little splash. For the vet building, we are once again using a blueprint from the Twilight pack, and we are going to make a couple of alterations, nothing too major. We just want this zoo to be quite simple, so we're going to use as many blueprints as we can, but do personalise them a little bit. Namely, this one has some lovely signs of the animals from the Twilight pack. We are going to remove any of the animals that we're not going to be using in this zoo, such as the raccoon, and add some of the lovely illustrative signs that we have for animals we already have in the zoo, like the armadillo and the caiman. And whilst we don't have a Pygmy Hippo one specifically, we will add the general hippo at the end as well. As you can see, I'm using the bush or maze kind of barrier to create a little cozy garden. It's just going to be a little bit overgrown with loads of flowers and stuff, but I like the idea of this actually being someone's house that they have transformed into a vet's. To create our well, I'm going to use some of the stone pieces from the Indonesian theme, and that is from the tropical pack that we got very recently on console. I really love these blocks. They have such a lovely rustic feel to them. What I'm going to do is place one and then one opposite it, and then I select them together and I can just copy and paste and turn on a point, kind of pivot it around until we get a lovely circle. You just saw me delete my previous attempt at it, which was just made from actual like faux rocks and stuff, and whilst it does look really rustic, I don't like it. Right here I'm measuring it up to some humans, make sure it is the appropriate size, and then I'm just gonna, as I said, copy and paste and turny-whirny until we get a lovely cylinder that we can use as the base of our well. Now, whilst we're doing that, I would just like to mention that grassy maze barrier that I used for the vets, I hadn't really considered it until watching this back and talking about what I'm doing, but would a maze work in this zoo? I think that's kind of a cool thing. When you go to these sort of spooky farms and stuff that do events, like there's one in the UK called Tully's Farm, where people dress up and they chase you around and stuff, there are always these mazes. Normally they're made of hay or whatever, but I think a really creepy maze could work as a non-animal related thing in this zoo, just to kind of contextualise it a bit. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. Another thing that I'm going to do for this well is not only am I going to increase the height just by duplicating what I've just made and twisting it a little bit, but for the actual wooden structure above it, I'm going to go back over to the bridge that we built in the last episode, and I'm going to take that archway that we had and shrink it down a little bit, delete some of the roof tiles, and then just adjust the wooden pieces so they all fit together a bit nicer and can be propped above this structure, because it works really well. It has that, oh, no pun intended there, saying it worked really well. It has that lovely, well-looking structure to it. I think it's going to work beautifully. And then using a bit of rope, we can just hang a bucket from it and make it look like a functioning well. If you are still watching this video and you have not yet subscribed, I'm going to encourage you to do so now. I would feel like I have more friends, which is always a benefit, because as you can probably tell just by my talking, I'm a little bit crazy and I spend my time building zoos that no one will ever visit, which is quite sad. Yes, okay, anyway, moving on. Now, by the time I'm actually finished with this well, I am really quite happy with it. I think it works perfectly. It just looks exactly how I want it to look. The only complaint I do have is that there aren't any like big bunches of rope that I could have put on the piece of wood that I hang the rope from, just to make it look like it is wrapped around it. Instead, it just looks like the rope is coming directly out of the wood, which looks a bit strange, but it works. You're never going to get that close to it. It works from a distance, and that is what matters. So, once I have built this well and I put it in the habitat, there is the case of actually building the habitat, and the perimeter is going to be following the theme that we've got so far. It's going to blend in with the buildings, and that is to use the little stonework walls that are part of the Twilight Pack. I'm just going to use the 2-meter tall one because the Pygmy Hippo does not need anything greater than a meter tall, because guess what? They can't jump very high, which is perhaps unsurprising. They are not the most athletic of creatures. But we're going to run a basic perimeter with this stone wall piece, and we're going to use nice curved edges and stuff, make it look pretty nice. However, when we get to areas where it has to change level and it has to be higher, there's no way for me to be happy about this. I could either tilt it so that it's a nice smooth transition, but then the bricks wouldn't have been laid that way. I come from a construction background. Before I started this channel and started my new apprenticeship in tattoo art, I come from construction, so I know that building a wall on that hill wouldn't work that way. It has to be kind of staggered instead, and that's a little frustrating because we end up with this weird stair looking shape to the wall, which isn't appealing at all. But I'm going to go with it. And my main way of getting around it is going to be, when it comes to placing all of the plant life and stuff, I'm just going to cover those areas. Make sure that you can't see those walls too clearly. The foliage is completely swamping it, and I'm just going to hope that that works well enough. And I do think it does by the end of it. And of course, in order to make sure that this habitat blends in with those around it, I'm going to need to move over the sign that we've created for each of our habitats, place it on this one, and make sure we have an appropriate animal next to it, which of course is going to be the hippopotamus. And we're also going to place some donation bins. And then we need to start making a shelter structure for animals, because there's no hard shelter. So all I do is make a wooden canopy that kind of branches off the side of the building and allows them a place to sleep, nice and cozy. And when it comes to the foliage for this habitat, I'm not going to go crazy with rocks. Normally I would, normally there'd be loads, but in this case there are just a few rocky outcrops rather than a lot of them, and that is because this used to be someone's garden and they wouldn't have had massive boulders and stuff until the earth had been worn away by the constant flooding of that well. So that I'm not going mad with rock work as much as I would like to. In terms of the general foliage, I'm just doing what I always do. I'm plastering it everywhere, making it look lush, full of life, and slightly overgrown. So, I'm going to stop talking for a minute so that you can enjoy the time lapse of all the plants and enjoy Floki's fact of the day, and we'll be back in a minute. When it comes to placing plants in the surrounding area for this habitat, we are once again going to go over to our skunks and take plants that we can use from them to just plaster everywhere basically. Like I said, we want the garden out the front of our veterinary centre to be kind of overgrown, and around the path and stuff, just like with the rest of the zoo, we're going to make sure there's loads of grass and small flowers and stuff, and we're really going to lean into the arrowwood bushes and this bit as well, just to really add to that grown over kind of feel. Plenty of tree stumps and whatnot. And for this path, we're going to start doing something that I plan to do on basically the whole zoo, and that is to light the path using the massive mushrooms from the Twilight Pack, the glow in the dark. They are lovely pieces, and I think this has secured my idea of using them for basically the whole zoo, because they look glorious on this path, and I think they will look glorious across the whole park as well. We're also going to make sure to add a bunch of candles and stuff and pumpkins to the walls of this habitat. A couple pumpkins inside as well, just to make sure that we are continuing that spooky theme in a habitat that otherwise hasn't been too spooky or creepy or anything. So we really need to lean into that a little bit. And with those final touches to the habitat in place, it is time to move on to our cinematics as we are done. But before we do that, we're going to have a little look at how the zoo has grown. Here's a shot from last episode where we were after building for the caimans, and here is where we are now. I feel like we are growing at a very acceptable rate, and I'm enjoying myself very much. If you are enjoying it, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'll see you later.